Look at a map of India. What do you see? A subcontinent bursting with diversity, over 1 billion people, thousands of distinct communities, and hundreds of languages. We're often taught that the story of this incredible place is one of difference. North versus South. Dravidian versus Aryan. A story that's maybe 5,000 years old, kicking off with grand civilizations and epic poems. But what if that's not the whole story? What if that's just the most recent chapter? What if I told you the story of India doesn't begin in India at all? What if a foundational layer of ancestry for nearly everyone in the subcontinent today traces back to a pivotal migration out of Africa tens of thousands of years ago? This isn't a story about recent communities or the history we read in textbooks. This is a forgotten chapter of our shared human story. Written not in stone, but in our DNA. This is the story of a time when the first modern human inhabitants of India were African. And the evidence for this incredible journey is inside almost every person in the subcontinent today. The genetic detective story. To understand this journey, we have to become genetic detectives. For decades, the deep history of India was a puzzle. We had bones and tools, but the story of the people themselves was shrouded in mystery. The sheer diversity of India made it seem impossibly complex. But in the 21st century, a revolutionary new tool changed everything: ancient DNA analysis. Think of your DNA as a living history book. Every cell in your body contains a library of information passed down from your parents, your grandparents, and their ancestors, stretching back thousands of years. Scientists can now read this book with breathtaking precision. They can identify specific genetic markers, known as haplogroups, which act like ancestral signposts. If a particular marker appeared in a population somewhere in the world 50,000 years ago, and we find that same marker in your DNA today, we can trace a direct line from you back through time. This isn't science fiction. Groundbreaking studies like a massive 2019 paper by Vaghish Narasimhan and a team of international scientists have analysed thousands of ancient and modern genomes from across South Asia. They've created a genetic map of history, giving us a much clearer picture of who populated the subcontinent and when. This research provides a data-driven story, and it begins on a completely different continent. The story it tells isn't one of fundamental division, but of a shared, deep origin that connects people all across India today to a small band of pioneers who made one of the most important journeys in human history. To find the first page of India's modern human story, we can't start in the Indus Valley or the Gangetic Plain. We have to travel back in time and across the ocean to Africa. The journey begins. A coastal route picture the world around 60,000 years ago. It's an alien planet. A harsh ice age grips the globe, locking up massive amounts of water in glaciers and causing sea levels to be hundreds of feet lower than they are today. The Sahara Desert wasn't the barrier we know now. In parts, it was a green savanna, teeming with life. And in East Africa, our species, Homo sapiens, was on the move. For tens of thousands of years, modern humans had lived almost exclusively in Africa. But then something changed. A small group, maybe just a few hundred or a few thousand people, did something no human group before them had successfully done on a large scale. They walked out of Africa. Geneticists call this the out of Africa migration, and it's a pivotal event for every person alive today whose ancestry isn't purely African. The evidence for this is written in our mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down from mother to child. The vast majority of people outside of Africa carry descendants of a single mitochondrial haplogroup, L3, which originated in East Africa. This means billions of us can trace our maternal line back to a common ancestral group that lived in Africa roughly 70,000 years ago. So how did these pioneers reach India? For a long time, it was assumed they travelled north through the Nile Valley. But a lot of genetic evidence now points to a southern dispersal route, a rapid coastal migration. Imagine them hugging the shorelines. The coast would have provided a consistent source of food like fish, shellfish, and edible plants, allowing them to move without constantly having to reinvent their survival strategies. They likely crossed from the Horn of Africa to the Arabian Peninsula, which was a much greener and more hospitable land back then. From there, they didn't turn north, they turned east. They followed the coastline of the Arabian Sea, across Persia, and into a vast new subcontinent. While other early hominins had been in the region before, these were the first modern humans to arrive. And when they got here, perhaps around 50,000 to 65,000 years ago, they weren't just visitors. They were the first modern settlers. They became the first Indians. The first Indians, the AASI. These weren't just any migrants. They were the vanguard of humanity, carrying with them the ancestral toolkit of our species: fire, sophisticated stone tools, and an incredible ability to adapt. For tens of thousands of years, an almost unimaginable span of time, the descendants of these early migrations were the foundational population of India. They spread across the entire subcontinent, from the foothills of the Himalayas to the tip of Kanyakumari. Geneticists have given a name to this foundational population: the ancient ancestral South Indians, or AASI. They are the genetic bedrock of the Indian subcontinent. Every later chapter of India's story is written on top of this first layer. But can we get a sense of what these first people were like? Astonishingly, yes. We can find a distant echo of this ancient past in the indigenous peoples of the Andaman Islands, like the Onge and Jarawa. Having lived in relative genetic isolation for thousands of years, their DNA provides a unique window into Asia's deep history. They are considered one of the closest living relatives we have to that early AASI-related population. It's important to be clear, the evidence connecting them to the first Indians comes from genetic markers deep in their DNA, not their physical appearance. While they aren't a perfect photograph of the past, they have their own unique history of thousands of years. Their genome gives scientists a proxy for what the AASI lineage looked like. This is a crucial point. For thousands and thousands of years, far longer than the entire recorded history of civilization, the subcontinent was home to these AASI hunter-gatherers. Their story isn't a footnote in Indian history, it's the first and longest volume. And while no single person today is 100% AASI, their legacy isn't lost, it's inside all of us. The great mixing. Adding the layers. Now, if you've followed discussions about Indian genetics, you've probably heard other terms. You've heard about farmers from the west and pastoralists from the north. So, where do they fit in? This is where the story becomes a tale of mixture, of rivers flowing into one another. Think of the AASI population as a great ancient river. For most of its history, it flowed alone. Then, new streams began to flow in. Starting roughly between 4,700 and 3000 BCE, people with ancestry related to early farmers in Iran began to mix with the local AASI hunter-gatherers. This mixture happened on the outskirts of the Indus Valley Civilization, creating a blended population that geneticists call the Indus Periphery. These Indus Periphery groups, who were a mix of both Iranian-related and AASI ancestry, were key players in the Indus Valley Civilization itself. After the decline of the Indus Valley Civilization, around the 2nd millennium BCE, this Indus Periphery population mixed more extensively with AASI groups, forming a new blended population known as the Ancestral South Indians, or ASI. Around the same time, a third stream joined the river. These were pastoralists from the Central Asian steppe, who brought with them horses and early forms of what would become Indo-European languages like Sanskrit. They mixed with the Indus Periphery population in the north, creating another blended group called the Ancestral North Indians, or ANEI. So that three-layer cake model you might have seen, it's a useful simplification. It's more accurate to think of three main source ancestries: the indigenous AASI, the Iranian-related farmers, and the steppe pastoralists, that mixed in complex ways to form the two main ancestral populations of India, ANI and ASI. The old idea of an Aryan invasion that simply wiped out a Dravidian population doesn't hold up to the genetic evidence, which points to a long, complex process of mixing and cultural fusion, but the key fact is that every single one of these mixing events involved the AASI, the descendants of that first epic journey, the revelation the DNA doesn't lie. This brings us to the ultimate revelation. When scientists analyze the DNA of people from the Indian subcontinent today, they can quantify these different ancestral components. And what they find is staggering. The AASI component, the genetic legacy of those early migrants from tens of thousands of years ago, is present in virtually every population group studied in India today. It's a genetic thread that runs through the entire subcontinent, ignoring modern borders, languages, religions, and castes. The percentage varies, creating a gradient. Generally, tribal populations and people in South India have the highest proportions of AASI ancestry. Some studies suggest it can be as high as 70 to 80% in groups like the Paniya or Irula people. In the north, the percentages are often lower, perhaps around 20 to 30%, reflecting a greater proportion from the later migrations. But it's almost never zero. From a Brahmin in Kashmir to a fisherman in Kerala, nearly everyone carries this ancient legacy in their DNA. This also helps us clarify a common point of confusion around communities like the Siddhis. The Siddhis are a distinct ethnic group in India with more recent African ancestry, largely descended from Bantu-speaking peoples brought to the subcontinent within the last several hundred years, many through the brutal slave trade. Their genetic signature is clearly and recently African, and it is very different from the ancient AASI signal. While genetic studies show some limited intermixing with local populations, the Siddhi community has remained largely distinct. The ability of science to distinguish between this recent history and the ancient one from 50,000 years ago is what makes this so powerful. One is the story of a specific community. The other is the shared heritage of nearly everyone. This is the forgotten history. The story that doesn't get told is that the deepest, oldest layer of Indian ancestry is a shared one, uniting over 1 billion people. It's a heritage that predates the Vedas, the Indus Valley civilization, and every kingdom and empire that has ever risen or fallen on the subcontinent. This journey of discovery is why understanding our DNA is so fascinating. It can completely reframe how we see our history and each other. If you found this journey into our deep past as amazing as I have, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. We're just scratching the surface of the stories hidden in our genes. Let me know in the comments what surprised you the most about this 50,000-year-old story. Conclusion: a 50,000-year-old family tree. So what does it all mean? It means the common narrative of Indian history, so often focused on recent divisions, is missing the first and longest chapter. For tens of thousands of years, the people of the subcontinent were fundamentally connected as descendants of a courageous band of pioneers from Africa. The incredible diversity of India isn't a sign of fundamental difference, but a testament to its long and complex history of welcoming and absorbing new people. Every new group that entered the subcontinent mixed with the people who were already there, adding another layer of colour to an already rich tapestry. The story of India is not one of replacement, but of accumulation. It's a 50,000-year-old family tree with its roots firmly planted in African soil, and its branches reaching up to encompass one of the most diverse human populations on the planet. The history forgotten in our textbooks has been remembered by our DNA. It suggests that before we were north or south, before we identified with any caste or religion, we were all connected. We were, and in the deepest part of our biology, still are, the children of a single epic journey. The story of India is and has been a vital part of the great human story that began in Africa, and that is a history worth remembering.